but some of them almost look like castor sugar. They're very, very granular. Some of them almost look like castor sugar. Super matched. Oh, super match game.
Super match game.
I've got gloves, as always. I've got 2 different pairs of gloves because that's just how I like to roll with the gloves.
We all love a bit of fancy business at Easter, don't we? Yes.
So let's bring in the blanket. Oh, I sounded like bring on the wall. Redistribute it. Oh, that's a hard word to say with a mask on. Move it around. 5 superwash merino, 15 nylon, and it's a superwash. I think I just said that. Yeah, it's a superwash. So I find if I pour it over the back of my spoon, I should have put my other gloves on. We'll manage. Oh no, I won't manage. It is quite hot.
Welcome, everybody, to the Bakery Bears video show featuring my favourite blanket.
Yes.
Oh yes, it's a very exciting episode because after 4 episodes in this series of preamble, of preparation, of wonderful increases, it's time finally for some fancy business.
Fancy business.
We all love a bit of fancy business at Easter, don't we? Yes. So I'm particularly excited because I've been dying, because I had no idea what was coming. I've been dying to see, and I bet you have too, what's going to go on now that we've reached our maximum amount of stitches.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, I know. I can't wait to see. And also as well, as it's the midsection, the first part of the midsection, I'm guessing that you have come up with a particularly wonderful and appropriate flower for...
I absolutely have.
Yes.
It's a very exciting flower because it's got a very strong knitting connection, this flower. And I've said that I think on the last episode, and nobody has guessed what it might be.
Amazing.
I'm really surprised. So
Try now.
See if you can guess now.
Yes.
Shall I give you another clue?
Okay.
Seeing as you're going to see it in a minute anyway.
You should mime it. Like, call my bluff.
I don't know that I could mime it. It's just a flower. How do you mime a flower?
It's got a lot of syllables. That's a clue.
It has got a lot of syllables, and there's a lot of the letter U.
Oh, they've got it now. You've blown it. They've got it.
In this flower.
Anyone who knows flowers will be straight there.
And popular knitting patterns.
So look, get ready for lots of fancy business in today's show. But it has, of course, been Easter. And happy Easter to all of you who've been celebrating.
You had a lovely time.
Yes. Yep. And there was limited fancy business going on here at Easter.
Yeah.
And that's because chocolate, for some reason, it's lost its luster for me. I don't quite know why.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we say chocolate and Easter because there is that huge association, but obviously it's a religious festival. But, you know, for the younger sort of generation especially, they associate Easter with eggs, don't they? And chocolate eggs in particular. Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't buy any eggs.
Well, we asked our daughter Bryony, and she said she didn't want one.
Didn't really want one.
And I think it's because, you know, I think you do get to an age, perhaps, where...
She just wasn't that bothered, and she's never really been bothered about a chocolate egg. You know, whenever we've always got them every year for her up until this point, and she never really eats the egg. She'll eat the bar of chocolate or sweets or whatever, but she's never bothered about the egg.
And I do think it was the same when I was young, because I do recall going in the cupboard. We had a cupboard which you used to put things like chocolate in. Yeah. And I do remember going in the cupboard and it being like 3 months later and finding a partially wrapped egg.
Partially wrapped up piece of egg.
And it's all gone white.
White, because it's old.
Yes. I must admit,
that's a temperature thing, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. There were years when I did sort of try a bit. Yeah, and it tasted sort of cupboardy.
You don't want to eat anything that's cupboardy, do you?
No. We had quite an old house growing up, and I think there might have been a bit of damp going on.
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
No, it's one of the problems, isn't it, with older houses?
I went in that house once, didn't I, when we first met, and I think that because it was surrounded by woods as well. That
was at its worst because it had been empty a lot.
It's all been renovated now, hasn't it? It was bought and renovated.
Yes,
it looks completely weird.
Sadly, my childhood home was renovated in the 90s with a sort of late 80s style.
That's when you were living there.
No.
We can't have been the 90s. We didn't meet until...
Sorry, it was renovated in 90s. It looks like it was done in the 90s.
Yeah. And it doesn't look at all like the house that it was years ago.
It's sort of a shame because it was a lovely sort of cottagey type place.
It was, yeah.
And now it's not.
It's not.
But everything changes. But you.
Oh, yeah.
We're 1,000 miles apart, but we love.
Right, yeah.
We've said goodbye. The taxi cab is waiting.
Stop. Can't bear it when you start doing stuff like that.
Now,
it's too much.
We had technical difficulties. Well, it wasn't. I just forgot to press record.
Yes, it did.
I was actually quoting, what song was it? Before Summertime and The Living is Easy. Yeah. So that's 2 songs I've done this morning.
In my neon orange jumper today.
Today's show is brought to you by Horatio Kane from CSI Miami.
I kind of look a bit like a Reese's Pieces, don't I?
I've had one of those
Is it that kind of orange? I don't know.
Honestly.
I hope it's not too in your face.
Is that in the last 20 years that I tried? How did I try Reese's?
Chocolate? Yeah. I don't know. It's the peanut butter stuff, isn't it? Reese's? I don't really like it.
It tasted weird.
Does it? I've never had one. I'm not a massive fan of peanut butter, to be honest. It's a bit cloyy. Dan loves it.
I love the stuff that you put in your mouth and you need water.
It welds your mouth together, doesn't it?
It's a disaster. But look, the one thing that you need at Easter is a good movie. Who remembers Easter, to be honest? Sometimes it was as good as Christmas. There was always something good on.
And I never checked the TV to see what was on. We don't really watch the TV.
No, because what we did was, we've realised now, probably been the last 10 years that getting the radio times at Christmas is a total waste.
Complete waste.
There's nothing decent on anyway.
I'm not going to get it this year. No. I always get it because I'm like, I've got to get it. And then it just sits there and we never open it. So I'm not buying it. It's expensive.
I'm totally with you. I think some of the time the issue has been me saying, no, but it's tradition.
No, it's been me. I know, it's been me saying, no, you've got to get it.
Not anymore.
Not when it's like £5 or something now.
This year, problem solved at Easter. Don't rely on the TV. You pick the classic movie to watch. Yes. And we watched 4 of them.
We did?
Yes, in possible preparation for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. We watched the first 4 Indiana Jones.
We did.
My goodness, aren't they good movies?
Really good.
They don't make films like that anymore.
No, and Bryony couldn't remember quite a lot of... She'd seen them all at some point, but she couldn't really remember much of it, could she?
No.
And she concluded her favourite of the 4 was the second one, Temple of Doom.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely Last Crusade.
Yeah, it is for me too. I like
Sean Connery's just brilliant.
Sean Connery's amazing, isn't he?
The looks... Just all,
he's brilliant. The humour, and it's just fantastic.
And they sort of played off well against each other, which I think was really good because that was key. I think
they did work. Yeah, they had a good chemistry together, didn't they?
It's funny because they're only 12 years apart in age.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah.
Right.
Which is pretty funny, really.
Right.
I've got to say though, we are concerned about the Dial of Destiny.
The new one, it's out in June, I think, which is not long, is it?
The concern stems solely from the poor effort of Disney with Star Wars.
Yeah.
And also with Harrison Ford's passion for killing off famous characters.
So we're a bit worried that...
We're going to wait for the reviews.
Indiana Jones might meet his demise, but
we're going to make sure he doesn't.
We're going to read spoilers when it comes out because I don't want to see it. It's a bit like the last James Bond film.
Yeah.
I don't want to see it because why would you want to see it?
The only reason that you might want to see it is if they weren't ever going to make any more. But
they are apparently, aren't they?
There's no apparently about it. They are.
So he can't be dead.
No.
And, it's just drama for drama's
They're
sake,
going to
isn't it?
reboot
and
it.
upsetting the viewers for no reason whatsoever. I don't approve of...
You were right in what you said
I don't
before.
approve of killing characters off
Drama.
just to add drama.
Drama for drama's sake.
Yes.
If you were going to finish
I do not approve of it.
If you were going to finish it, then yes, okay, there needs to be an ending, and if you happen to choose to kill him off, maybe so.
Yeah.
Personally, I still wouldn't have gone to see it because I think that certain characters should, because at the end of the day, it's fiction, folks.
It's fiction, isn't it?
And there's certain
characters that shouldn't die.
The world feels better with them being in existence.
Absolutely.
For example, case in point, Harrison Ford kills off Han Solo. That was the moment when it all...
I really fell out with Harrison Ford at that point. I always loved him as an actor.
But then they fixed it when they brought out Solo, a Star Wars story. Because suddenly he was back and alive, and you were like, everything's okay.
Can you imagine he's still alive somewhere?
And you can just pretend that dreadful film never even came about.
And that's what we do.
Yes.
We pretend it doesn't exist.
Yes. Look. Forget all this movie talk because we're here for some knitting. Yes. Oh, yes. And fancy business, of course, in the middle of the show. So to get to that fancy business, I need to ask, Kay Jones, what's on your needles?
Well, I've got 3 new things this time. That's very, very exciting, isn't it? And my first of the 3 is in a bag that kind of matches my jumper, which is very coordinated of me. And this bag actually is an autumnal themed lovely bag with mushrooms and pumpkins and leaves.
My goodness, we've covered some seasons today, haven't we?
We seem to have gone through all the seasons because the project that's in it suits this bag. This bag is from lovely Jill at Bertie and Poppet, and I love Jill's bags, and it really matches the project. So in this lovely bag is my next platinum design. That is the collection within a collection situation that we've got going on this time.
Every year, Kay brings out 4 platinum patterns.
Yes.
And never before have these platinum patterns been connected.
No.
Other than them all being her exclusive platinum connection for our golden
they've just
platinum
been
patrons.
standalone designs,
and I remember walking into this room, this very room. Kay was sat in her chair and she said, I've had an idea.
Did I?
And I loved as well that the fact that the idea was sort of, for me, the best ideas come from practical application.
Yeah.
And you decided that you wanted a coordinated set of things to wear when you went out for your walks.
That's true.
Genius.
Yes. The first of these designs was my Magic Faraway mitts, which came out on the 1st of March. I've shown those before a couple of times here on the show. So they've gone out and I've seen lovely versions of those being knitted up by patrons. Absolutely fantastic. So this design is the second of that little trilogy, let's say, of designs, which are all kind of connected to each other and all inspired by the same thing. And I'll talk a bit about that. So this design will come out on the 1st of June, and it's a hat. So we've got mitts and we've got a hat next. And although these are connected, they're all part of sort of a little collection, they're not super matched. Oh, super match game.
Super match game.
I used to love blankety blank.
So did I.
Did everybody else have a little moment then?
I'm pretty sure. I think it might still be around in some countries.
Oh gosh, really?
And I think that it has different names in different countries.
Oh, right,
I think it might be called the match game in some countries.
Oh, right.
I think. Tricky.
Blankety blank here.
Yes.
Fabulous quiz show.
Best presenter was...
Well, I'm a fan of Terry Wogan.
Wrong.
But you love Les Dawson, don't you? I knew I was going to say that. You were a big fan of Les Dawson, I know.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, but I used to like Terry Wogan presenting it. But whatever, it was a great show, and I always wanted a blankety blank checkbook and pen. Oh, I would have loved one of those.
Well, didn't you love Les Dawson when he did the thing in the back garden, talking to and I always used to do the thing.
If you like that sort of humour, would have made you laugh.
You laughed.
Yeah, and he was funny. He's not still alive, is he?
No, he's not.
No, he was really
such
funny.
a shame. And
it was definitely of its time, but
one of the best things he did.
Funny is funny at the end of the day.
It is. It's still funny now.
I think it's funny.
One of the best things he did was when he played the piano wrong.
Oh, he was
that
brilliant.
shows you what a genius at piano he was.
Yeah,
because it's so hard to do that.
He was a great pianist.
He was brilliant.
Yeah.
Reminiscent for me, actually, of another comedian who you love, the great Eric. No.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm not keen. You're going to say Eric Morecambe. Morecambe and Wise. I know it's controversial. I'm just not a great fan of their humour. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, everybody.
Don't worry, because I make up for it. Go on,
anyway, back to my lovely hat.
Yeah.
So this hat...
It was your fault for saying super match game.
I know. I didn't say... Oh, I did.
Yes.
What started me off saying that?
You
super matched.
It's not super
It's not super matched.
Yes.
It's totally my fault for going off on that tangent.
Yes.
But no, they're not super matched. All three designs use the same yarn.
That's lovely.
So that's the connection.
Yeah.
It uses the same yarn. Each design is different in terms of like stitch patterns and things like that. But when you put them together, you know, if you were going to take a photograph of them, they will look like a cohesive group because the yarns are the same that run through. So all of these designs are inspired by the lovely book by Enid Blyton, The Magic Faraway Tree. And so the first pattern I took from the sort of iconicness that it is and called them the Magic Faraway Mitts. This second design, I've actually taken inspiration from one of the chapters in here.
Do you know, I'm ashamed to say I'd never heard of that book until you did this
Really?
design. Yeah.
Maybe it was more of a girl thing. I don't know, though, because I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. I couldn't say that. My brother never read any of these, I don't think. Enid Blyton. Maybe Enid Blyton was seen more of a girl thing. Maybe I'm wrong in that.
What was her most famous stories?
Famous Five.
I read some of those.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're more sort of adventure-y stories,
Yeah.
so that would be more appropriate, I guess, for both girls and boys. But
she taught me to spell.
Did she?
No, didn't she always get spelling mistakes in her books?
I don't know.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the sort of... I'm sure...
But that's not her. That's her publishers then.
Well, yeah.
Was it deliberate?
I think what happened was it was missed initially.
Oh, right,
and then it became like
a thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There might be like spelling mistakes or grammatical errors or, something weird going on.
Oh,
and it was always like a thing because...
I didn't know that. Yeah, so this next design, this hat design, is inspired by one of the chapters. And the chapter is called The Land of Spells. So this is the Land of Spells hat. And I just loved it. And in that chapter, they climb up the tree and they go to this land of spells where you go and you can buy lots of spells. And it actually reminded me of Diagon Alley in Harry Potter. And the illustration that's in here, I'll just show it to you quickly here, I think just looks exactly like that. So, this was written, obviously, decades before Harry Potter, but I just liked that kind of connection to something that you can relate to in our world now, sort of thing. I think that was really nice. So, yeah, this is the Land of Spells hat. And I'll go into more detail about what particularly inspired the design when it sort of launches, but I just wanted to show you because I've got going on it.
It does look lovely, goodness.
So here we go.
Wow.
So we've started down here with this lovely rib, which is in the main colour, and this is the colour that I dyed up. And then I've started on this lovely stitch pattern, which it's got some movement in it. I wanted the stitch pattern to show a sort of movement, an undulating movement, because that is reflecting part of the story. And I came across this stitch pattern, which I've modified, because I always do that, to make it work. And it's got a lovely movement. Can you see that ripple that moves along? And I'm using, I think in this design, I think it'll just use 3 of the minis, because I'm using this whole skein, which I dyed, in this lovely sort of nutmeg colour. And then I'm using a mini skein set to go with it, and the mini skein set will be used in all 3 designs. So you only need 1 mini skein set of 5 20-gram minis, and we'll use them in all 3 designs. So the mini skein set is from Beehive Yarns, and it was called Woodland Walk. Perfect. And the colours just match perfectly. But for this hat, I'm using this lovely dark green, a sort of speckledy lighter green, and then this kind of neutral. And they will run up the hat like that. And then we'll switch back to the main colour for the top bit. I just wanted again, this is inspired by that chapter, and I will go into more detail, but I just wanted like a band of it running around above the brim. And I really love it. So it's a really nice lace pattern to work. It's not complicated, but it definitely gives you a little bit of something to think about. So we've got some nice rib, a nice deep rib as well. I did 2 inches, a good, it's definitely a full 2 inches of rib. And then into this lovely undulating lace stitch pattern. And then we'll go back to the main colour, and then we'll have crown decreases, and then I'm just deciding whether to do a little bit of fancy something at the top. I don't know yet, I haven't quite decided that. I'm really loving it, and I think there'll be 2 sizes for this. I'm doing the one which will be classed as a sort of medium to large, and then I think there'll be a size below that as well, because I think this would be a lovely thing for a child as well. So I started it on 2.75mm, and then I switched to 3mm. That tends to be my favourite size needle for fingering weight. I don't really like knitting fingering weight on like 4mm needles. I know that's really popular, isn't it? Really popular to knit fingering weight on 4mm, especially for things like shawls. But even when it was a shawl, I don't think I would use 4mm because it's way too loose and gappy for me. I do prefer, a bit more. It's by no means a tight gauge on 3mm, I don't think. Yeah, I guess it depends what you're knitting, because I know if you knit 4mm, then you'll get a very drapey, loose fabric. And sometimes that's suitable, isn't it, for what you're knitting. I just like something with a little bit more structure. I think that's probably a good word for it. So if I was going to knit a shawl with fingering weight, I would probably use 3.25, 3.5, I would say at the most, that it's largest. So yeah, Land of Spells hat being worked on, and this will be going out on the 1st of June. So I will show you that. The next time I show you that, it'll be finished, and then you'll be able to see it in all its hatty glory. But I'm loving it, really, really enjoying it. And those minis are beautiful. So Dan Jones, what's on your needles?
I'm in love, and I don't care who knows it.
Elf.
Yes. Well done.
Let's think about that.
With every stitch of this fingering weight garment, I am perhaps realising that this is where my future lies.
Oh gosh, are you doing Shakespeare there, darling?
No, I'm just talking.
Oh, right, okay.
Sorry, that's just me. Hello, it's nice to meet you. I thought you knew me by now.
Yes.
I'm serious.
What? You don't talk like that all the time.
No, what I'm saying...
Yes, I know what you're saying. Yes, I understand what you're saying, my darling.
I'm knitting the Roosty tank top. What are you looking for?
I was looking for labels.
Oh, okay.
I beg your pardon.
It's okay.
I'm shifting in his project bag.
I never mind you shifting my project bag. It's not a problem. I'm knitting the Roosty tank top, and it's with this gorgeous yarn.
It's beautiful.
And it honestly is all just wonderful. Kate picked the colours because I'm just not very good at things like that.
Did.
Boys, I think certain boys, I don't think it... Well, who knows? Maybe it's just certain people.
Yeah.
Probably is. It's either something... It's probably something that with experience and with, that you would get good at it. But when Kay's an expert at it, and I think you enjoy it. And
I do.
When it's for you, makes sense, doesn't it? That you pick the colours which you must like to wear.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing to choose colours. It's really difficult. But the yarn that Dan's using is the Jameson & Smith jumper weight.
Highly recommend it, definitely.
Yeah, it's lovely.
I mean, I'll talk more about the thicker one next time when I show you my jumper, but that one is also growing on me now a little bit, that yarn. But here is... First repeat's done. Into the second repeat.
Look at this.
Which is pretty cool, isn't it? I'm very excited, actually, to my first experience of, and, this just shows how, maybe in this in a few years, but I hadn't done too many colourwork charts which repeated, and the big ones.
Yeah.
And the first one, actually, was on Hadrian's Cowl.
Yes.
That was the first one.
Yes.
That sort of joined up. This one also joins up.
Yeah.
And it joins up in such a cool way. It's like, oh, yes, this is really good. It's only going to make sense to you as I knit through it more. Right now, it's not going to look like anything. And that really sort of excited me. But the thing, I don't know, there's just something about the quality of, it just feels right.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And the fabric it produces is just gorgeous. It's got a very individual... it's almost got a personality, this yarn.
Looking at the projects that I've knitted, the ones with the thicker yarn, I don't know. To me, when I look at them, I mean, Let Lope is another yarn which has real character.
Yeah.
And so I will always, I think, really love and enjoy those types of jumpers and making those types of jumpers. But there's something refined about knitting a garment in fingering weight.
Yeah, definitely.
I couldn't ever do a sort of plain jumper because I'm just not into that type of knitting. I'd fall asleep.
No, and
not through boredom, but through the fact that plain knitting just lulls my brain and I'm gone.
Yeah.
But also as well, I'm not into wearing sort of totally plain jumpers. I like things
with something going on. Yeah.
And I just feel like
lovely.
This is, how I've said at certain times through, all the things that I've knitted over the years, oh yes, I really feel like I've been working to this point. This is another one of those moments. Definitely feel like, been working to this point. Loads to learn as well, which is really good because it's a real challenge, but I'm loving it. So...
It's gorgeous. And the colours, actually, I keep meaning to get a list of colours for you. I will definitely do it for next time. But that one I'm pretty sure is stone. This dark brown is brown mix. And then I'll get the other colours for you for next time. This pink is my favourite, I think. It's really kind of marled and gorgeous. Really pretty.
And obviously all the patterns that we mention, which are on release and available to buy, we always link in the show notes below. So it's the Roosty tank top and it's Ella Gordon designs.
Ella Gordon.
And it's lovely.
It is absolutely lovely.
Yes.
So have you finished the repeat now?
Yes.
So do you start again here at the bottom?
Effectively, yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
But
it's so lovely.
It's really well designed. It's not just like, oh, well, we'll just do that twice. Yeah. There's a reason behind everything, which I really like. Where things are joined up.
I love it. I can't wait
connected,
to wear it.
That makes it, for me, a sort of more enjoyable project to knit. Seeing it how it sort of appears and comes about. So, loving it.
And it's 3.25mm that you're using. I can't remember if we're doing the same as the pattern. Can you remember?
I can't.
Can't remember what we decided to do, but 3.25mm. And this is fingering weight, and it uses 3.25mm, but then you wouldn't do colour work. I don't think. Would you do? No, I don't think you'd do colour work with a hugely big needle unless you were a really tight knitter, I'd say. Yeah.
Cool.
But it's gorgeous.
What else is on your needles?
Gorgeous. Right. Oh, my next thing's very exciting. It's a new pair of socks. And you know how... Oh, these have all got tangled. Do you know... I need to get one of those bags that has, like, 2 compartments. Do you know... Because whenever I've got, 2 socks on the go at the same time, when you're knitting them concurrently... Is that the correct word? I think so. They just all get mingled together in my bag. I need to... There we go. It's not too bad. Anyway. So, yeah, this pair of socks is one of my kind of geeky-inspired pairs of socks. You know how before I've knit socks that are inspired by, Star Wars and Star Trek and all kinds of things. Lost I've done as well. This is another pair like that. And this pair of socks is inspired by a series that me and Bryony have been watching, for some months now, actually. And we're on season 7 now. There's 10 seasons altogether. And this sort of passion of Bryony started when I got her to watch, actually. I just suddenly thought, gosh, this must be a couple of years ago, that she would really like the film Stargate, the original film with James Spader in it. And who was the main fella? Kurt Russell. And well, she absolutely loved it. She watched it a couple, maybe 3 times, really, really sort of quickly. She absolutely loved it. And then sometime after, I knew there was a Stargate series, but never mentioned it to her because I knew it was different people and I didn't think she'd be bothered. But sometime after, I said, do you know what? Shall we just have a look at the first episode of Stargate? And she's like, yeah, all right then. Well, of course, she absolutely loves it. And to be honest, I love it too. We watch it together on a weekend when we're having lunch. Me and Brian, you watch a couple of episodes of Stargate. And we've been doing that for months now. And we're on season 7. And we just absolutely love it. So recently I thought, you know what? I'm going to dye up some Stargate yarn. I'm going to knit Bryony some Stargate socks because she loves things like that. She loves when she has pairs of socks that mean something to her. So I dyed up the yarn and I wanted 2 colours. I took the inspiration from the opening sequence to Stargate. They changed the intro on some of the on a couple of the seasons. They changed the intro and it was rubbish. It was just like an image close up of like an Egyptian statue thing with a bit of the Stargate. It was rubbish. We didn't approve of that. But now it's back to like being really cool and it's got like characters and bits of action and things going on. And in that opening sequence, you see the Stargate. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the Stargate is like this big circular object, like a ring. Imagine a big ring and it moves and it's got symbols on, and basically it's a portal to other worlds, to other planets. So you can key in a code and it goes to different planets. That's basically how it works. So I took inspiration from the Stargate itself, which is like a sort of greyish metallic-y sort of colour. And then also in the opening sequence, there's like this really vivid blue that appears quite a lot. And the Stargate itself in the centre, when it's doing its portal thing, is like this blue. So we've got a blue and we've got a Stargate, the actual Stargate itself colour. And I came up with these 2 colours. Look at that blue. Isn't that fabulous? So we've got this really bright blue, which is just like a tonal. And then we've got this gorgeous speckled, which is very metallic-y looking. It's actually quite difficult to dye yarn that looks like a metal, I find. But I'm really pleased with this. I'll show you it knit up and it looks really nice. And I don't know how many different colours in this. And there's colours in this you would not expect, actually. I based this colour on a colour that I've actually dyed and sold in my shop when I used to sell yarn, and it was the dark side and the light. It was a Star Wars reference. So it's based on that, but it's got some different colours in it because I didn't have the exact colours that I used for the dark side and the light, and I also wanted to tweak it. So I've used some slightly different colours, but that's the basis of it. And it's lovely. And I'm knitting them concurrently, because I had 2 50-gram skeins that I dyed up. So I thought, well, it makes sense. I can knit them both at the same time. But then what I did is I also wound off 2 sort of minis so that I had for heels and toes and cuffs and things. So I had the right combinations to work them together. And I'm about at the same point. I'm quite a way down the leg. So here's the blue one. This blue is just glowing, isn't it? And can you see how I've put in a little stitch pattern there? I wanted to put a stitch pattern in that was kind of a bit reflective of space and stars and things. So this stitch pattern is like a little starburst. And I actually took this stitch from my Clementine socks pattern. In the Clementine socks pattern, it uses this stitch, but it's also a rib. So I've removed the rib element of it and I'm just using the stars because I just wanted it to look like they were in the sky, these little starbursty details. It's lovely to work. You know, it's a really nice sock to knit. So that's my blue one. And then here is the Stargate colour one. So they're opposites.
Okay.
feel like there should be a word, but maybe there isn't. So here's the grey one, and I just love how this has knit up. Hang on, let's move that. There we go. It's so pretty. And the little starbursts do show up better than I thought they would actually on this, which is quite variegated. So the two socks together, how cool are they? I'm a little bit further ahead on the grey one, I think. Just a few rounds. Oh, so nice. She loves these. And I think I'm going to knit a slightly longer leg, because she does like a slightly longer leg these days, because she tends to wear boots to school. Certainly all through the winter and spring she wears boots. So I'm at 40 rounds at the moment here. So I'm going to go to either 50 or 60. I'll see what it looks like at 50. And if I don't think that's quite long enough, then I'll do 60. Because this is a 10 round repeat, which is perfect. So yeah, I'm really, really loving these. And I think I'm just going to put in a normal heel flap and gusset. And probably an umbrella toe, I would have thought, because that's my favourite. And I'm knitting them on... I think these are 2.5 mil, because Bryony prefers socks to be not super sucky. She likes them just to fit on a foot rather than negative easy fit. So yeah, I think these are 2.5 mil, and I did a 1x1 rib, which I'm still loving, even though I have to be careful not to go nuts with that. So yeah, aren't they fabulous? Ooh, I'm so pleased, and I just love that blue. And honestly, I could not tell you how I did this blue. I know people are going to say, oh, you know, what colours did you use? I couldn't tell you, because I literally just went in and just dyed it, because I thought I'm not ever going to need this again. I like doing things that are just one of a kind. When it's a sort of personal project, it's just really nice. I think I used like 3 different colours of blue. There's definitely sapphire blue in here from Jacquard. I know that for certain. And I think there might be some turquoise in there, but I'm not sure of the other. But I just love it. It glows. It's such a pretty blue. So yeah, Stargate socks.
Equinox Mitts.
Oh my goodness.
It sounds like another show, doesn't it? Equinox.
Equinox.
Yeah, I like that. Oh yeah, I'm already thinking of ideas.
That should be a show, shouldn't it? A programme. You see, we would never say show
Look,
growing
don't start
up.
with the grammar.
We would never say show. We would have always said programme.
And series.
And series
Not
and not season. But language is just changing, isn't it? And we always try really hard.
We just put out an episode of our radio show all about grammar.
All about grammar and language and things. And we kind of, as parents and hearing a teenager talk, you know, because they obviously pick up things from things that they've watched and friends and, you know, that say things. And we're like, no, that, you know, we would say series, not season. And she's like, it is season. And it was the same thing. I said, no, but, you know, we would always say series. We try to maintain the sort of tradition, don't we?
Yeah,
but
and I
think
suppose
we're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we cover it in depth in the radio show because language has changed so much.
Language has changed.
We don't say thee and thou anymore, and we used to in the 18th century.
Yeah, language has always evolved and changed, hasn't it?
I do think that it's a positive that, you know, wherever you are, whatever your traditional way of speaking has been, whether it be in your family or in the area where you've grown up, you should champion it.
I think so.
Hold on to it, because
hold on to it as long as you can.
You.
Yes.
So these Equinox mitts were designed for me by Kay for my birthday, and I am onto the decreases, which is fun, and also it's fun for me because I'm having to keep the pattern going, which is great. I love things like that. For most people, they may think, oh, you know, that's easy. I'll just read my knitting. Not for me. It's a bit more challenging. It's a challenge that I enjoy.
I didn't give him very detailed instructions when it came to the decreases. I just put maintain in pattern, I think. I thought also, that'll flummox him.
You will recall last time where I identified I had a ladder fixed.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
That's really good.
By following Kay's wonderful tutorial about fixing your ladders, focusing on the second stitch.
Second stitch of the needle.
Oh, yes.
That's the one that you give a little tug on.
Absolutely resolves the situation. And it's a lovely project. Lovely project, actually. Just enough patterning going on here. And with it being a mitt, and
I could pop it on.
Yeah, you could. That's the wrong hand.
So it is.
That's why I was looking puzzled. I was sort of concerned about... Yeah, I mean, the decreases are quite sharp, aren't they? Yeah, that's fine.
That's okay.
Yeah, just...
That's all right, though.
Yeah, I think they'll end up fitting pretty great because they do finish off quite sharply now, which is really cool.
Yeah, for the top, I can't remember how I came up with the decreases, actually. It's that long ago that I designed it. It's quite a while now, isn't it?
Okay.
I gave you this last October, but I think I was designing and knitting it in sort of early September, so it's difficult for me to remember that far back. But look, that's a long time for my brain.
It is. It is very much.
But yeah, aren't they lovely?
So the yarn is the merino yak.
Yeah.
And it's just lovely. So sort of soft and warm, and it's lovely for
but
next
woolly
to skin.
still as well.
Oh yes, very, very woolly.
Yeah, it's lovely, lovely.
It doesn't smell like the Jameson and Smith.
No.
I'm starting to enjoy the smell of the Jameson and Smith.
You quite like the smell, don't you?
Woolly wool's quite cool. Makes me feel like I'm sniffing a sheep.
I don't think it's quite as bad as if you actually sniffed a sheep. I don't think you would want to sniff an actual sheep.
Well, no, but when you're in the vicinity of a sheep,
tend to be a bit mucky, don't they?
A bit bongy. But it is definitely a sort of great step up for me, I've found. Well, step up, side step, slight step forward from sort of socks and mittens and those types of things. They really keep that small needle dexterity going, and it's just a nice change up from socks,
and
which
you're
I
using
really
2.5 millimetre, I think, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, so
it's cool.
That's brilliant.
So
really pretty.
Lovely Equinox mitts, and the great Latvian braid at the bottom, done correctly for a change, and some lovely sort of fancy business. It's the show of fancy business.
It is.
On the cuff.
Yeah.
What else is on your needles?
Well, the last thing I've got to show you is a project that, I'll be honest, it's not filling me with massive joy. But do you know how sometimes you just have things that you've got to knit? Well, you don't. Oh, that's the wrong thing to say.
Yeah, it's obligation knitting.
It is obligation knitting. I showed you last time, and I've finished it, so I'll show you that in finished things. I have finished the hat. I showed it to you last time that I am knitting for Grandpa Steve. I've finished the hat, so I'm now working on the cowl because it's a little set that I'm making for his birthday. Nana Wendy asked me if I would do it, and I couldn't say no. I just couldn't. You sometimes can't, can you? Even though you're thinking, oh gosh, I haven't really got the time, I don't really want to do it. But sometimes you just have to do it, don't you? But I'm not very good with obligation knitting at all. I find it, even though this is perfectly pleasant to knit, I just struggle with it because it's not something that I've personally chosen. So I tend not to do obligation knitting at all these days. I used to do a lot of sort of Christmas gifts and things like that. I just don't do it anymore. This is an exception because it's for a very special person, and I was asked to do it by a very special person, so that's what's important. So yes, I'm working on the cowl now, and I'm not far off finished actually. I'm on the top rib. I'm not doing this really deep. I'm not doing it really long, I should say. Is that the right word? Yeah.
Can I just ask, Kay?
Yeah.
What's this knitted in? No, you've got to say it.
Oh, right, okay.
With regret, I don't have the sound drop.
Oh, right,
because you banned me from ever using it again after I went crazy with it last episode.
Yes, look, I'll show you.
They're only wanting you to say one thing. What's it knitted in, Kay?
Premium acrylic.
Now, for all those people who want to see the review, the first part of the review, which I lifted that sound drop from, it's available right now. It went out on Tuesday this week. You're doing a 2-part review.
Yes.
All about this Wendy with Wool premium acrylic.
So this is the yarn that I'm using. It's a giant 400 gram ball of Wendy with Wool Aran weight, which is 25% wool, 75% premium acrylic. If there can be such a thing. And the colourway is Fjord, which is really nice, and you get something ridiculous like 800 metres per ball, but that's 400 grams. So having knitted with this now for a little while, it doesn't feel like I'm knitting with an Aran weight wool. It feels more like DK worsted to me, but I don't know, who knows. But yeah, I'm knitting the cowl and I'm using 4.5 millimetre. So I've put in the same stitch pattern that I put into the hat, which I took from my Hobbity socks. The Hobbity socks were a design that I put into our Christmas Knitability edition in December just gone, and it's been a hugely popular pattern. I've seen so many people knitting Hobbity socks and absolutely loving it. And I knit a pair, and I showed you here on the show, in Moustache yarn, a very Hobbit Christmas, and that's where I took the name from. And it is just the perfect textured pattern for, I use self-striping and it looks absolutely fantastic, but you could use it with any yarn. And I've seen lots of our patrons knitting up all kinds of yarn, tonal, speckled, all kinds in it, and it looks fantastic. So I took that stitch pattern from it and popped it in because I knew it would just give me something to do, to focus on. And it looks lovely. So I started down here with a 1x1 broken rib, because on cowls, although I want a rib to keep it all flat and stop it curling, I don't like ribs on a cowl that suck in. So I always do some kind of rib that will lie flat, rather than sucking in. So a broken rib is perfect. So it's just one round, knit one, purl one round, knit. And that just stops it from being too ribby, but makes it lie perfectly flat. And then I've done the Hobbity stitch pattern, and now I've just started the rib again. So when it's finished, it'll probably be maybe 12 inches long, because I didn't want it to be really cumbersome around his neck. I just wanted this to be just a little something just to keep his neck warm, but I didn't want it to interfere with any movement, because he'll be gardening when he has this on. At least I hope he wears it. So I think that's about...
I think he'll be told to.
Yes. At least for a photo to send to me, if nothing else.
This will be obligation wearing.
Yeah. But the colour's lovely, isn't it? It shows it really nicely there on the screen. So I'm not far off finished, and I've been having this as my bedtime knitting, because I figured even if I only get sort of 4 rows a night done, and I cast this on I think I'd already cast this on just on when we did the last show. So this is a couple of weeks it's taken me. So it's not bad, is it? And I've just got the rib, which might take me another, 4 or 5 nights maybe. And then I'll just bind off. And then this will go off. His birthday's next month, so that's perfect. So it's been perfectly pleasant, but I'm just not a fan of obligation knitting, unfortunately. So I'll be glad to get it done. And I just, I really hope it's liked when it gets there.
Well, supposedly he likes his hand knits now. So
oh, does he? I did knit him a pair.
Reason why.
Yeah, I knit him a pair of socks years ago, and he never wore them initially.
And then he wore them out.
And then we went down one time, and it must have been about 3 years after I made them, and he got them on. I think Nana Wendy had said, right, Kay's coming, put those socks on.
Well, he's worn them out now. He loves.
And then he realised that they were really nice, and he's worn them, so that's good. So this will be done for next time. And I've finished the hat, and I'll show you that shortly.
Cool. And you'll be filming the second part of your
and then
premium acrylic review?
I will, because then I will have blocked both things, and I'll be able to say afterwards. Yes.
Right, at last we've made it. After 4 wonderful episodes of increasing, today we reached the fancy business of the first central section of My Favourite Blanket. Now, if we're going to knit something gorgeous, we need the perfect muse, the perfect plant inspiration to create the ideal colourway for this rather auspicious and wonderful occasion. What's it going to be? Have you guessed? Let's find out in a brand new episode of My Favourite Blanket.
I adore creating and knitting blankets, so I decided to design a new one just for us. In this series, I'm going to show you how to make your own, from the yarn to the stitches. Join me as we knit through the seasons to create my favourite blanket. blanket. Welcome everybody to another episode of my favourite blanket, and we are back in the woods, but how different does it look to last time? I was here, wasn't I, just a few weeks ago in my big coat. We've got snow everywhere, and now it's like a beautiful spring day. There's little buds everywhere, it's looking very green, and it's really quite mild today, so a complete change, which is lovely because I'm here today to tell you about the next flower that is the inspiration for section 5 of our blanket. So the flower that I've chosen has a knitting theme, and I've been saying this for a little while now and nobody's kind of guessed what it is, but I'm going to tell you. The flower is a ranunculus. And if you're in the know in the knitting world, then you will know that the ranunculus is a hugely popular pattern that's kind of like an oversized sweater with a little bit of sort of lace going on here, and it's just been knit thousands and thousands of times. So I just loved that connection to the knitting world as well. The other reason I've chosen the ranunculus is because it is one of my favourite flowers. I absolutely love this flower. It's part of a family actually that includes the buttercup, and it's often referred to as the rose of spring because it is very much like a rose in its form. When you look at it, it does look very much like a rose. It's a lovely delicate flower, and I often associate it with weddings as well. I think it is a very popular wedding flower, and it's gorgeous. It flowers in a whole range of colours, from sort of deep reds all the way through to white, some gorgeous pinks. But the two particular flowers that I've chosen for the yarn inspiration today, two varieties, one of them is the prettiest shade of like dusky lavender lilac-y purple. It's just gorgeous, and it's called Elegance Mulva. It's kind of like Parma Violets, it's that sort of colour. It's beautiful. So that's going to be our tonal today. And then the other flower is the most amazing one. It's called Super Green, and that's because the petals are green. You know, they're a mixture of green and white. I don't know, I mean, when do you ever see that? It's really rare, isn't it, to have an actual green flower? So the green is going to be our speckled yarn. And the combination of the two together, when you knit them up, it's just so pretty. And the flower is gorgeous. It's often used, I think, as a cut flower. And I know that when I have my lovely garden at some point in the future, I'm going to have a bed that's for cut flowers, and I'm definitely going to have a go at growing ranunculus because they're just so beautiful. So that's our flower. I'm so excited. We need to get into the kitchen and start dyeing that yarn so we can get it knit into our blanket. So let's get going. Okay, so here we are, ready to dye up our beautiful ranunculus yarn. So what we're going to need, first of all, we will need the yarn, and as usual, I've got my yarn already soaking here. As always as well, I've got 4 50-gram skeins of fingering weight yarn. My 50 grams are 200 meters, and I've got 4 of them in here. I'm using an 85-15 blend, so 85 superwash merino, 15 nylon. So I've got my 4 skeins here soaking, and I'm going to do 2 skeins in each of the colours. As I've said before, that's just so that those who are dyeing 100 gram skeins, if you can't get 50 grams, then the quantities are the same. So if you are just dyeing like 150-gram skein, for the speckling, it doesn't really make a difference. You know, you just speckle the yarn that's there. But for the sort of more tonal ones that we're doing, you just halve your quantities. So that's our yarn soaking in some warm water just from the tap and some citric acid. You can actually get different dye results depending on the type of water that you have in your area. So for example, if you've got really soft water as opposed to really hard water, what that means, I don't know if that's described the same way in other countries, but basically what that means is it's the level of kind of minerals that are in the water dependent on where you are. So if you're in a really hard water area, you might find you got a lot of lime scale in your kettle and you have to descale it quite often. As opposed to if you're in a soft water area, then the minerals quantities are less. So that can affect how your dye comes out. So if you do get slight differences to what I do, then it could well be that it's just because your water is different in your area. Our water here is kind of somewhere in the middle. It's not really soft, not really hard. We've got a sort of neutrally kind of water here. We've then got our citric acid, which I've already mentioned is in the water here. So this is the mordant. The mordant is the substance that makes the dye permanently fixed to the yarn. So for me, that's citric acid. You might want to use vinegar. I don't like using vinegar because it smells. That's really the main reason. And also it's more difficult to store than the citric acid because this is granular. This is food safe, so there's no problem at all in using that and keeping it in your kitchen, you know, there's no problem. Then we've got our pots to dye our yarn. I've got 2 stainless steel pots that I'm going to be using today. These are the pots that I always use, and I only use these for dyeing. Don't, you know, once you've used equipment for dyeing yarn, only use it for dyeing yarn because dye powders are toxic. I've got gloves, as always. I've got 2 different pairs of gloves because that's just how I like to roll with the gloves. And then I've got something to protect my work surfaces, so I've got a spare bit of oilcloth and some old tea towels. I've got my mask, of course, my dye book already, my big spoon, and the dyes that we're going to use. Yes, and before I tell you the dyes, we are going to be speckling, so we've got paintbrushes to speckle, and then I've also got my measure that I always use, and it's 1/8 of a teaspoon. Oh, we're also going to need, for this one, your little jug that we've used before. So I just keep a little plastic jug and I just use this for my dyeing, so we're going to need that today. And ideally it's one that's got the measures on it. I think they pretty much always have measures on, don't they, when it's these little jugs for the kitchen. And then we've got the dyes. Today we've got sort of 2 groups, as we normally do, for each of the colours. So for the speckled yarn, we've got 3 different shades of green. So the first one is jacquard, and it's number 630, and that's spruce. Spruce is, as it sounds, you know, a spruce tree. So it's that kind of really dark evergreen kind of colour. We've then got a landscape dye, and this one is tarragon. Tarragon is like a sort of mid-green. It's not super dark, and it's not like a really pale green. It's somewhere in the middle, so it's like a lovely mid-green. And then my favourite green, which is Dharma dyes, and it's sour apple. We've used sour apple before. I kind of struggle with greens, and quite often if I want a green, I will mix it with a blue and a yellow to get the right shade that I want. But these 3 work brilliantly well. So that's the 3rd green, and sour apple is like that bright Granny Smith colour green. Lovely, my favourite. And then for the sort of tonal yarn, we've just got 2 shades because we're now going to be working through the middle section of our blanket. And during the middle section, the stitch count remains the same. Although the pattern within it will cause slight variations in that, it's not a completely kind of as if you were knitting stocking stitch where everything's the same. It's not like that, but still we've got the same number of stitches on our needle. So I didn't want to use one that was really variegated. Like before, we've done some variegateds, haven't we? Because we could get away with it because the stitch count was changing all the time. This time we're going more kind of tonally. So we've just got 2 colours. The first one is one of my absolute favourite dye colours, and it's from Landscapes again, and this one is Dusk. And this is the most beautiful dusky, purpley, moody sort of, do you know that kind of colour? I mean, you'll see when we dye it, but imagine mist on a moor when the sun is just coming up and there's heather. That's what it brings to mind to me. It's that kind of really dusky, moody, lilac-y, purpley shade. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful. So Landscape Dusk. And I don't know any other purple that's quite like this. I haven't found any other purple that's quite like it. But the second colour that I'm going to be using, if you can't find Dusk, then I would just say just use this one. And this is Jacquard Lilac. So we're going to be using the 2 together, but if you can't get the Landscape, just go with the Lilac and use, in place of when I use the Dusk, just use a bit less of it because this is more intense. Okay, so Jacquard number 612 Lilac. Okay, so that's everything we're going to be needing. Our yarn is already soaked, so we can get straight on and dye up our first colour. Okay, so we've got some water heating up here on the stove, and I've only got about an inch of water in there, and we've got another scoop of citric acid, so about a tablespoon into there. And that's heating up nicely now, it's nice and steamy. So I'm going to get my yarn into the pot. So I've got 2 of my 50 gram skeins, just squidge it out, because when we're speckling, we don't really want to introduce any more water. We keep water at a minimum when we're speckling. So give it a nice shake just to loosen all those fibres, and then into the pot. And as it goes in, I tend to sort of move one skein to one side and the other to the other. Oh, this is quite warm. So now, just like I said, move one skein to one side and one to the other, filling up all of your space in your pot and making it kind of as random as you possibly can. We want plenty of yarn exposed on the surface and not really a lot of water. If you find when you put your yarn in you think there's too much water, just get your little jug and scoop some out. Pop your jug in and just scoop out a little bit. There's not a lot of water in there to start off with, so we won't need to take a lot out, but that will make a difference. That's better. So the first colour that's going to go in there, first of all, just check that your water isn't boiling, and you know that your yarn isn't, there's not too much movement going on in your yarn. If you see that your yarn's really starting to boil, turn it off. It won't come to any harm, because when we're speckling we don't want it boiling. We don't want anything to disturb the laying down of the dyes. Okay, first colour is Spruce. So we're going kind of from dark to light as we usually do when we're speckling. So Spruce is that really intense dark evergreen. So go steady with this. You can always add more, we obviously can't take it away. So just a little bit. And as we've done before, we're just going to drop it into a few areas and just go steady at first. We can always go back once it's had a chance to sort of absorb a little bit. And don't forget the bit of yarn up here that's sort of over your cable tie. My favourite word. So just choose a few areas as we've done before. I find this a really good speckling method. It's straightforward, you know, it's easy to do, and it produces a really nice result. You can probably see now that green developing. You may not be able to in the light, but it's really developing now. It's a really beautiful evergreen. So I can see where I first put some on here. I'm going to put some more. Having swatched this up, it's really nice to have some really intense pops, quite deep. So, you know, don't be afraid to get an intense hit of colour in some areas. because it's all sort of diluted, if you like, when we knit it up. Maybe a tiny spot there. There's a little gap. Okay, that's good. Right. Lid on. Next colour, which is the tarragon. Now the landscape dyes, some of them almost look like caster sugar. They're very granular. This one is quite a fine granular sort of situation, if you like. But you can go a bit, generally you can go a bit more freely with the landscapes just because of the way that it's formatted. So I've got the tarragon, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over where I've been with the spruce, but then also give it its own little area. So just choose a little area, and at the minute it kind of looks like a similar colour, but it is actually quite different. And going over that same area will intensify the spruce as well. So make sure you give it its own little area to sort of show off, but then also overlap a little bit. And I don't know if you can see the difference in the two greens, but there is definite difference. There we go. Lovely. And then the sour apple. So the sour apple is going to go in those little gaps we've got. So this one is very powdery, so go sort of steady, but where you see a little gap, just pop a bit of that sour apple in. It just gives a pop of lightness, and it's such a lovely contrast with the other greens. Over here, I think. Okay, so now before we do anything else, I'm turning my heat back on. There we go. And just now bring that up to where it starts, you start to see movement again on the surface. So we just want that to be really nice and hot. And then we're just going to leave it to sort of just gently, not even simmer, but just gently heat. You know, we don't ever want to boil our yarn. I can see that's moving already, that yarn. So I'm just going to turn it down and just leave that for 5 minutes or so, just to set those colours, and then we will turn it and repeat the process. Okay, so that's had probably about 7 minutes if I was going to estimate exactly. And it is now set. The way to check your set is just get your big spoon and just choose an area. And first of all, I just kind of tap it gently, go steady, just in case it's not set. But if you just tap an area, you can see there's no bleeding into this white area. And then go into like the really intense area and just grab a bit of the water, lift it and drop it, and you can see there it was clear. Just check on the other green as well, because all of the dyes will behave differently, the different brands, but it's all looking perfect. You can see there's no bleeding there, and we've maintained quite a lot of the white area there, which is what I wanted, because the flower that inspired this colourway is white and green. You know, it's very much white and green, so I did want to keep some of that white. Inevitably it will probably dye to a very pale green, but you know, that's fine because the flower does that too. So we now need to turn this yarn. The heat is on and it is bubbling a bit now, but that's fine because it's set. So we're going to turn it. So if I just lift it up, this will give you the opportunity first of all to see how it's dyed, just dyeing it one layer, but also it should show you the colours. So if I lift it up backwards way, you can see we have got some dye coming through, but generally there's not a lot there at all. If we turn it, that's where all the action is. And can you see, oh, it's so pretty. I love the contrast of the green on the white. It's so lovely, and the spruce has got that sort of bluish green tone. And then the sour apple is that very vivid, more palish, bright green. Okay, so now I'm going to move the skein probably about a third of the way around. And at the same time as I move it, I'm going to turn it just to make sure we get good. Actually, do you know what? I'm not going to with that one because I've not got a lot going on here. So just judge it really for yourself. You know, it might be that it doesn't need actually turning. This one I think I am going to turn. There we go. And then drop it back in and move it around so that we've got those areas that we didn't get. You can see here, look, and here. We want those areas exposed now to dye. And inevitably you will have some areas where we've already got dye, and we can just avoid those, or they might get a little bit extra, not a problem. Okay, we're good to go. So I'm going to do the same process again, but probably not as much dye, because I find if you vary how much dye you use when you switch the orientation around, that gives a lot of variegation in the yarn as well. So I'm going to start with the spruce and then choose these very white areas. Over here, definitely, we've got plenty to go out over here, so let's go there, over here, that looks good, a bit more there I think. Cool. On to the next colour, which is the tarragon. Same thing, a bit of overlap and then a bit by itself. And then the last, that lovely bright sour apple. Just find those little gaps for a little shot of brightness. I love this green, it's such a happy green if that's possible. Put a bit over there, look. And maybe a bit there. Okay, so lid's back on. I'm just going to pop my heat back on for a second. So now what you need to do is make sure that it's nice and hot, so bring up your temperature again. And then that colourway will be finished. So once it starts to sort of really move around and you know you've got a good heat, we can turn the heat off and then set it to cool down, and that colour will be finished. Okay, so we're ready now to do our lovely tonal colour. So I've got heating up here, a pot with water. It's about 1/3 of the way full, I would say. And I've got another scoop of citric acid in there, so about a tablespoon. So I'm going to pop my dye into the water. So the first colour I'm going to use is the dusk. So you top off, look at the colour in the pot. Oh, it's so lovely. So I'm going to put in 3 flat 1/8 of a teaspoons into the pot. Okay, 2, look at the colour as it goes in. There's a lot of blue in this, you know, as it goes in you can kind of see the blue in it. 3. Now we'll see where that leaves us when we pop the yarn in, and it may be we need a bit more, but let's start there. So in it goes, and give it a stir around. It looks quite intense at this stage, but it's really not. So give it a really good stir to make sure that all of that dye is dissolved and it's all evenly stirred through. So look at the colour. Yeah, let's see what that looks like when we put the yarn in, and we may tweak it up a bit more, but we shall see. I really wanted you to see this colour on the yarn in its kind of subtle form, because it's just so pretty. And you may choose just to leave it as it is once we've put this colour on. Okay, that's nicely stirred now. So we can pop our yarn in. I'm just going to grab my skeins, squidge, give them a little shake. And in they go. I'm going to use my big spoon to sort of guide it in. So just drop it in. Yeah, that's good. And do this quite slowly. And as it goes in, move the yarn around to make sure that we're getting good coverage. But we do want some sort of tones, you know, lights and darks tones in this. So that bit that goes in first is obviously going to get more. And then as we move it down, it'll get lighter. So it's all in now. You can see straight away we've got a huge difference in tones there. It's nearly all gone, that dye already, because I wasn't comparatively there wasn't a lot in there, and I wanted you to see the colour, how pretty. I hope this is coming across on camera. It's just the most gorgeous colour, and it obviously tones right down up here. So I am going to add a little bit more because that is a little bit light at that end. So I'm just going to move it, but I wanted to show you in this gorgeous pale form because you might want that paleness. I have swatched this with using it as it is like this, and it does give a much softer look to the colour because it all dilutes down. It's really pretty, but I wanted to just pep it up a little bit, but it's entirely up to you. It's a really pretty colour as is, but certainly I'm just going to add a little bit more dusk into this because these colours here, that's too light for what I want. So all I'm going to do is just open up my die again, lift these up and drop in another flat 1/8 of a teaspoon. Just drop it in, give it a stir around, and then drop that back in. And let's see where that gets us. It absorbs the colour in literally seconds because we're really not using a lot compared to how much yarn we've got, so it just, you know, sucks it in really quick. So let's see where that's left us. You can see now we've got a lot more colour in there. It's still nice and pale and subtle, but we have got a lot more colour. I mean, this by itself looks so much like that particular ranunculus flower that I chose. It's just so pretty. And I'm just deciding if it needs to be even more, a little bit more of this purpley colour. Do you know what? I'm going to add just a touch more. There we go. Just, it wasn't even a teaspoon that, it was less than a teaspoon. I would much rather do it this way and build up the colour than just whop in a ton of colour and then think that's too much because there's nothing you can do about it at that point. So, like I said, you might now choose to just leave it as it is, you know, and call it done because it's such a beautiful colour. It's just gorgeous. But when I swatched it using just this one colour, I found that it was just a little bit too subtle of a background. So I'm going to pep it up a little bit with the lilac. But like I said, it's up to you. If you left it at this stage, you'd get this absolutely gorgeous. Imagine a pair of socks knitting that. Wouldn't they be just the most beautiful socks? But I am going to pep it up. So what I'm going to do now, so I'm just going to get my jug and take some water out. So, I mean, there's like 300 mils there. I'm just doing this by eye. But the reason I'm taking water out is because I'm going to introduce water back in. So now, when I look at it, I've got maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches maybe of water in there. So that's fine. And I'm going to separate the two skeins out and just lay them back in the way that I do when I'm speckling. Because what we're going to do is going to make a liquid dye of the lilac, and we're going to pour it just on this layer here, and it'll just pep up the colour. Okay, so I'm going to take my lilac and I'm going to use just about 1/2 of an eighth, because we don't want it to take over from that purple. We just want to sort of brighten it a little bit in certain areas. So we've got about 1/2 of an eighth in there, and I'm going to fill it up to about 200 mils and give it a little stir. We might not use all of this, but we'll see, because I don't want to overdo it. If you use a lot of this, it does pack a punch. Can you see the colour of it in my spoon there? And we only used 1/2 of an eighth. If you think how much we used of the dusk, I think that just shows the difference in the intenseness. And I'm just going to pour some over the surface of our yarn. So I've got my dye here, but what I'm going to do to make it a bit softer is I pour it over the back of my spoon so that you're not getting, when you pour yarn in, it's a thin stream, isn't it? And you get lines. I'm not keen on that. I find if I pour it over the back of the spoon, it just softens it as it drops in. So just gentle pour like this over the yarn. Can you see it going in there? And it's just going to, like I said, pep it up a bit. And then give it a little push down. And you might have to move your pot around just to access different areas. So as it goes in, I sort of give it a little push. It's a bit fiddly, but I find it's worth it not to get those really harsh lines across your yarn. We've used about half of it there. I'm just going to go over to this side because we've not got any round here. I'm not going to move this yarn. I just want this highlight of a brighter shade in certain areas. So we're just going to do one layer of it. And it will really help just intensify that sort of lilac-iness. I think we're nearly there actually, just a little bit more. So I probably won't use all this. I might use about 150 mils, I reckon. I think that probably looks good because I don't want to overdo it. So I've used nearly all of it, haven't I? Now, turn up your heat, and then once that comes to temperature, I say that all the time. What I mean by that, when I say bring it up to temperature, it just means when it starts to sort of bubble a little bit, I know that it's hot enough. That's what I mean when I say that. So once we reach that stage, and we're almost there now, we can pop it outside with the other one to cool down. Okay, so that's our yarn all dyed up and it's outside cooling. So come back in part 2 when the yarn will be miraculously washed and dried and it'll be all ready for us to start knitting, and I'm so excited because this colourway in particular, oh my goodness, when I swatched it I was like, oh, that is absolute heaven, and really very appropriate I think for the time of year, for that May colour. It's so pretty, can't wait. So I will see you back very soon in part 2.
That's what I call a colourway. Oh my goodness, the green and white in that ranunculus are so striking.
That's the most bonkers flower ever, isn't it?
But what's so cool is, and I'm guessing this is the thing with all flowers, is the variations that you get in the same, is it genus they call them?
Yes, it is.
I really don't know what I'm talking about.
ranunculus comes from the buttercup
Amazing.
family.
That's amazing.
And I didn't know that before I did the research.
You would never have thought such a stunning...
You wouldn't have thought
intricate.
those two plants were related, would you?
I'm fascinated as well, or when I start to think about it, I become fascinated in how they create these variations by bringing together...
Crossbreeding, yeah.
It sort of blows my mind a bit.
Yeah.
What a wonderful start. Perfect colours.
Hope you like the colours.
And the fancy business still hasn't arrived.
No.
Because it's in part 2. Although that was pretty fancy.
It was pretty
but
fancy.
Yes, part 2 is the moment. It's the moment you've been waiting for. So to get there, I should ask rather quickly, Kay Jones, what's off your needles?
I do have a couple of things. How exciting.
Oh.
So...
Look.
So the first thing is, look, it's the hat that matches the cowl.
Knitted in.
Premium acrylic. It's the same yarn I was just talking about.
Premium acrylic.
I'm not going to say it ever again, that's it. So yeah, here's the hat. So I did block this. I gave it just a light block. So the hat's all done. There's not really much to say about the hat, really. I based this on my...
It looks great.
Yeah, I based this on my Angel Hat pattern, which is a free pattern that's out there. And this, it is an Aran weight pattern, and the yarn I used was a hand-dyed Aran, and I do remember it feeling thicker than this one, which is where I'm getting my kind of reference point from, I suppose. It has some really nice crown decreases, which are lovely.
Yeah, the yarn looks lovely on camera.
Yeah,
I think it looks better on camera than in real life.
Well, no, it is perfectly nice yarn, and you know, it'll go in the washer, and it'll probably last a nuclear war. Being acrylic, but sometimes, you know, needs must, doesn't it? And I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to knit it in 100% wool that, you know, it would need a bit more caring for, and this is something that he's going to wear when he's gardening. You know, I wanted it to be robust.
Well, it's definitely going to fit the bill, and it'll definitely keep his head warm when he's out in the garden at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, definitely. It's really nice. I'd put it on, but it'll mess my hair up. But I did try it on Dan when I first made it, and it fit you.
Yeah.
So we should be good.
Yes.
So that's the first thing.
Wonderful. Great start.
Grandpa Steve's hat.
Oh, and look.
And then the second thing is, look what I finished. Oh, look. How lovely are these? I finished Dan's rainbow socks.
Inspired by my favourite childhood TV show.
Up above the streets and houses. Yeah. That was a great series. Loved it. So yeah, I finished Dan's rainbow socks. Aren't they just ridiculously large?
I always felt sorry for Zippy when they zipped his mouth shut.
Oh, I know. And I used yarn from Creolien Design.
And Kay's very thankful that she's not going to have to try and say...
I don't have to say that again for quite some time.
For the foreseeable future.
And it was a club colourway, a rainbow club colourway from September 21, I believe. So it's not a colour that's sort of available in a shop right now. It was a club colourway. But yeah, these are blocked and all done and beautiful. The yarn was great. Really, no complaints at all. These have been washed and blocked, and I didn't have a speck of bleeding, which I think is just brilliant considering all those vibrant colours.
What is it? What, did you say? I missed if you said...
What do you mean, what is it?
What type of yarn is it?
It's just 75-25, right. Just sort of the standard 75-25 that a lot of dyers use. And I consider this to be quite a light yarn.
Right.
In terms of like the thickness of the fabric that you get.
Yeah.
And I do knit a lot of Dan's socks using this base because you like this feel of yarn in the summer particularly.
Right.
Because the base that I use most often is 85-15, and that's a bit plumper and a bit more kind of cosy feeling. Whereas this one I see as a bit lighter and a bit sleeker and really hard wearing, brilliantly hard wearing.
That's so good, isn't it?
Yeah.
With socks, I mean, I suppose it must be quite an achievement for some. It certainly was for me. The first socks I knitted, and the one thing that you want is
you want them
that's
to last. Yeah, you want them to last a little bit, don't you? And this yarn always does with you. So, all done.
That's so exciting.
And you can have those.
I can actually have those.
You can have those now. They're shorties. I don't know if you'll want to wear them quite yet. But.
No. Do you know what? I do think it is. I love my sock drawer. It is the business because, I'm so unbelievably lucky having Kay knitting me wonderful socks all the time. And what I love is that, I can totally go nuts on a particular row of socks and like be picking it. And it's like an excitement. It's like, I forgot these ones. And then the season finishes and you push the warm ones back, you pull the summer ones forward. And again, it's like a voyage of discovery.
Yeah.
And you've knitted some cool ones. Literally just last year, and just really perfect for summer wear.
Yeah, well, you like that. The reason
it's the hardest thing.
Yeah, I mean the reason I made these short is because I know he likes wearing the short ones in summer. And actually, do you know, I've been wearing a short pair of socks myself in the evening with my pyjamas. It was the pair that I made it was the Malabrigo sock yarn. It was called something. Can you remember they brought out a sock yarn which had got nylon in? So it's Malabrigo sock, but it's got nylon in it. I forget what it's called, Ultra Sock or something or other. And I knit a pair of socks in it, and they're just shorties just to try it out. And do you know what? I've worn those socks such a lot. They're brilliant, and they've been in the washer numerous times, and the yarn is fantastic. So definitely, if you've got a skein of that in your stash, I would say use it. But I really like short socks. I'm going to knit myself another pair, I think.
That's good.
Yeah.
Cool. Look, that's enough waffle.
No, I've got one more thing.
Oh, I thought you said two things.
A couple. Well, I said a couple, but I just wanted to quickly update you on my crochet sock squares, because I've added in the ones from that pair of socks that I've just finished for Dan. Do you know, I'm crocheting a little 5-round granny square each time I finish a pair of socks. So I've already shown you some of these, but we've got that one, which if you remember, that was the XXL, the trekking. And then that's the looping colourway that I dyed. These were from my rumple socks. That was the heel colour. And then these three are from that pair of socks I've just shown you. So this is the heel colour, which I dyed myself. And then I did 2 squares because it was a rainbow yarn. I did 2 squares just to show off a bit more of the colour. So these are just little 5 round granny squares. So each time I finish a pair of socks, I'm going to add to this pile, and then some point in about 5 years, I'll have enough to join together. But it's really fun. I'm really enjoying doing that. So I just wanted to show you those.
Cool. It's time for the fancy business.
Yes.
The wait is over. Let's find out what we're going to be doing in the midsection of my favourite blanket.
Welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of my favourite blanket, and we are at the knitting stage. So exciting. So before we can get to the knitting, I had to, of course, give the yarn a lovely rinse. So I rinsed it in my usual favourite of the moment, my Eucalan Lavender wool wash. Gave it a nice rinse. I then got it dry, and we're all ready now to skein it up. And no, we're not. We're all ready now to cake it up. It's in a skein and start with the knitting. So I've got my 2 beautiful skeined up yarns here. My 2 extras, so pretty, and I've got the 2 here ready to cake up. But before we do that, I'm going to answer just a couple of questions that we've had in between the last show and now. And the first of those questions is a question about yarn bases. And I've had a few questions asking this actually, and I think it's because I'm using the same base the whole way through. I've had a few questions saying, can you use different bases? Can you mix your bases? The answer to that is generally it's yes. What I would say is you can use any base you like really, as long as it's fingering weight and as long as your yardage is round about mine. You know, I wouldn't go any shorter in yardage terms per grams as I'm using. So my 50 gram skeins are 200 meters per 50 grams. So if you were using a 100 gram skein, you want at least 400 meters. So as long as it's fingering weight and round about 400 meters per 100 grams, then I would say you're good to go. You can mix your bases if you want to. I'm actually knitting another blanket, which you will see much later in the year, but I am knitting another one, and I have mixed my bases in that. So I've got 75-25, I've got this base that I'm using here, the 85-15, I've got some 80-20s. So I have mixed bases, and there's no problem in doing that at all. All I would say is that if you are using a superwash yarn, then stick to superwash bases. Don't mix superwash with non-superwash, and that's really because you won't be able to wash it in the machine if that's what you want to do if you have put some non-superwash yarns in there. And also they do behave slightly differently. I find that non-superwash yarns tend to have a different sort of fabric when they knit up. I feel like they're a bit more woolly. So stick to the same, either all of it being superwash and all of it being non-superwash. But apart from that, then yes, I would say you can mix your bases. The particular question I had was somebody asking if they could use a 50-50 merino silk base. And you can, of course, use that. There's no problem. You've just got to bear in mind that silk has very different properties to 100% merino, for example. You know, silk is very drapey, it's heavier, those kinds of things. But it's entirely up to you. You know, go ahead and mix your bases. If you're using leftovers and scraps, there's no problem at all with that. And then the other question that I've had this a couple of times is, and I've got my blanket here to show you, is how do I get rid of the hole where I add in new yarns? So here, I haven't woven these in. I don't know if you can see, but here where you join in a new yarn, there is a hole here. So where you've stopped using one and you start using the other, you do get a hole. Now I have shown this technique, and I showed it in, because I've got these ones here are woven in. I haven't snipped them yet, but it's woven in here. You can see there's no hole at all. So I have shown this technique, and I showed it in part 2 of my favourite blanket, which is in show number 217. So if you want to see how to do that and you sort of missed it in that episode, just go back and just watch the My Favourite Blanket segment on episode 217 and I will show you that. So that's a couple of questions that I've had in the meantime, and we're going to get going with the knitting, but I need to tell you first of all what we're going to be knitting today in our blanket. And we've finished all the increases now. This is mine here. You can see all 4 sections looking beautiful. We're going to be starting today the kind of straight section. So when you do a corner to corner blanket, you can either make a square, and if you do a square, all you do is you increase all the way up like we have, and then you just start decreasing, and that will produce a square. Our blanket is not a square, it's a rectangle. So to achieve that, we have to have a section where we are working the sides that go up here. And to do that, it involves increases and decreases, because we are maintaining the stitch count, and that will then force one side to, you know, when you lay it in the orientation it's going to be, one side will go up like this and the other side naturally goes up. It'll make sense once you start knitting it if you've never done this before. First of all, we're going to be doing a new decrease. Now, I've completely made up this decrease because I spent absolutely ages doing all the decreases I could possibly find to get the neatest edge. And what I was after was something similar to the edge that we've been producing with the increases, in that you don't see where we've done those increases and decreases. The fabric just sort of stops with no sign of those increases or decreases. Like I said, I did every type of decrease I could think of, that I could find in my research, and in the end I just thought about it and none of them were working. None of them were achieving the result that I wanted. So I just thought, you know what, let's just think about the kind of science of this and what I want to achieve. And basically I just wanted a stitch to disappear without any evidence, which of course isn't possible. But I worked out a technique of getting a really neat result, and it does just look like the fabric ends. You can't actually see within the fabric the decrease. So I have made this up. It's come out of my own head. I gave it its own name, but of course with anything in knitting you never know if someone's already done this. We're now going to show you how to do that. I'm going to obviously explain what I called it and why I called it that. And then the other thing just to say before we get on with the knitting is that through the centre section, so the next 4 sections, there's a little bit of what I like to call fancy business going on. So it's not just plain garter stitch, we've got a really pretty and simple eyelet pattern that runs through the centre section. And the reason I put in a little bit of pattern is because we've now got the highest number of stitches on our needles. I just wanted something to keep us motivated, and also it looks really pretty. I've worked through the whole of the centre section on my other blanket and it looks really lovely. So, are you excited? I'm so excited to get going. So the first thing we need to do is to cake up our yarn. Okay, so I'm going to wind up the tonal one first. Looking lovely. So we've maintained that gorgeous soft sort of dusky lavenderish colour, but then we've got these sort of highlights of the brighter lilac that we just sort of shot through there. So over my Swift, I did actually get some feedback on how to use my Swift and my ball winder, in terms of like this bit always falling sort of over, and using my Swift as well. But unfortunately I've still not been able to sort of correct the issues that I have with it. But it's the issues are not enough to stop me using them. It works perfectly fine. That's all of our ties off, and then we just need to find, there we go, you'll have one end that comes off kind of from the outside here, and then the other end will be more on the inside. So you want to find the one that's pulling away from the outside, and then pop it onto a ball winder and get winding. Oops, see what I mean? It is a bit awkward, but once I get in position, it's all right. There we go. We're away. And then I just sort of slow down as I get near the end. There we go. So that's the first one. Oh, it looks yummy. It looks a bit like Parma violets. It's a really, really gorgeous colour. Every time I wind these tonals that I've been dyeing, I want to knit socks with them because I just think they look so pretty. Oh, gorgeous. So I'm going to wind up the speckled one now, and then we can get to the knitting. Okay, so we've got our two beautiful yarn cakes of the Ranunculus. I do struggle to say that, Ranunculus yarn. And we're ready to start knitting section 5. So all the way through the centre, so the next 4 sections are going to be the same as this section 5. And I'm telling you that so that you can either make a note of what you need to do. If you are a Bakery Bear patron, you will receive the written pattern anyway, so you don't need to do anything. But if you're not, then you can just write it down as I explain it to you. Or I've actually written out this section here, I've typed it up, and you can do a little screenshot and then you've got it. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through it first, and then we will start the knitting and I will show you. So it's a 4-row repeat through this section. So we've got row 1, which is your right side. We are going to knit to the last 2 stitches, and then we're going to work what I've called a lift over decrease. So that's the LOD. Lift over decrease. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Row 2 and 4 is knit to last stitch, knit front back. So that's exactly what we've been doing up until this point. And then row 3 is the only row where you're going to have to pay some attention. So this is where we're going to create the eyelets, and we've got a repeat here, as you can see with the brackets. So it's knit 4, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 4. Repeat to the last 2 stitches, and then we do a lift over decrease again. So on right side rows 1 and 3, we're decreasing at the end. And on wrong side rows, which are rows 2 and 4, we are increasing with a knit front back at the end. So we're only ever doing increases or decreases at the end of the row. So that's giving you time there to screenshot that if you want to. And now we're going to start the knitting. So let's bring in the blanket. So we're on the right side row, so obviously starting with row 1. I've got my 2 beautiful yarns. Oh, look at the speckled. Okay, so let's grab our 2 ends. Pull off a little bit of yarn, and we're going to start off. Now we're going to start our first row, exactly how we started off the previous sections. So I'm going to knit the first 4 stitches with my old yarn. So old yarn, and knit the first 4 stitches. And then I can bring in the new one. Where's my ends gone? There they are. So yarn held double, as we've been doing all the way through, loop over and just start knitting. And with that second stitch, just make sure you are knitting with the right end of yarn, that you're not knitting with your tail end. So row 1, we are knitting to the last 2 stitches, and then we are going to work that lift over decrease. So I will whiz to the end of this row and I'll see you back in a second. Okay, so we've got to the last 2 stitches now. Almost there. There we go. Okay, So the way that the decrease works, as the name says, I've called it the lift over decrease because we're going to lift a stitch over. So we're going to lift the final stitch on our needle here. I'm going to lift it over the other remaining stitch. There's actually two ways of doing this. I'll do it this way and I'll explain why I've chosen to do it this way, but then I'll show you an alternative method that's a little easier. So I'm going to grab that last stitch with my right needle, put my finger over this stitch here so that it doesn't fly off, and then just lift it over like that. And then this last stitch that I've got now remaining, so knit that last stitch through the back loop. And that's the decrease. And you can see right away, can you see here? That's where it's going to start going up in this direction. And this decrease, it just makes it look like the fabric stops. You can't actually see the decrease. It gives the merest sort of hint of a little blip on the wrong side, but once the more you do, the less you sort of see of that. So it doesn't look exactly like the other decrease because they're different. One's an increase, one's a decrease. You can't get them to look exactly the same. But I've found this to be the neatest way, certainly that I've tried, of doing a decrease at the end of the row. So if you find that a bit awkward doing it that way, what you can do is when you get to those last two stitches, if you turn your work, so you've then got the last two stitches are over here on your, what would be now your right needle, you can then use your left needle to lift that last stitch over the other remaining stitch, turn back, and then work it through the back loop, that last stitch. And I was doing it like that for a little while and I found that really easy. But then I thought, do you know what, let's just try doing it with my right needle. And I've got used to it now. And actually, when I've compared the two, doing it the way that I've shown you is very slightly neater. So for me, that's an absolute win. So that's the lift over decrease that's going to be worked at the end of this row, which is row 1, and also at the end of row 3. So we're now going to turn our work and start on row 2. Row 2 is just exactly what you've been doing up until this point. So we're just going to knit to the last stitch and knit front back. So I will get row 2 done and then I'll come back and show you row 3 because that's the row with the eyelets. Okay, so that's row 2 done and we're ready now to start on row 3, which is right side. I know it's the right side because I've got my little marker, which row 3 now is our eyelet row. Really, really easy. I don't use markers or anything like that. I've knit through rows and rows and rows and rows of this and never had a problem. I've never made a mistake. It's really straightforward. You do just have to pay a little bit of attention, but it's one row out of the whole thing that we need to just pay attention to a tiny bit. So I'm going to start off and the repeat is knit 4, that's 4, and then we're going to knit 2 together, yarn over and knit 4, and it's that easy. So we're now just starting that repeat again. But because we've got a knit 4 at the beginning and a knit 4 at the end, once you get past that first knit 4, then you can think of it as knit 8, knit 2 together, yarn over. Until you get to the last sort of, it will be 6 stitches, won't it? And then you've just got to knit that 4 at the other end of the repeat. I hope that makes sense. I think of it, once I get going, it's knit 8, knit 2 together, yarn over, and keep going. So that's the end of that repeat, and I've done 4, so then I'll just start counting 5, 6, 7, 8, knit 2 together, yarn over, and then start again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, knit 2 together, yarn over, and just keep going. Keep doing that repeat until you get to the last 2 stitches where we're going to work the lift over decrease again. So if you need to just see that decrease again, it is really simple. You know, you're literally just lifting one stitch over another. But if you need to see it again, just skip back a little bit and just watch me do it again on that first row. So that's really all you need to know now to knit through this whole section. Row 4 is just a repeat of row 2. So we're just going to knit the last stitch and knit front back again. So we're going to repeat those 4 rows a total of 8 times. So you will have 8 little eyelets when you've finished. So it's 8 repeats of those 4 rows. So that's everything you need to know now to knit through section 5. You should have about 7 or 8 grams of yarn left. That's what I've had each time. I've knit through this section numerous times, and each time I had around about 8 grams of yarn left. So there's plenty of leeway for anybody with sort of different gauges. Okay, so that is section 5 done. We have done the fancy business, and you know now what that's all about. I really hope you enjoyed that, and I really hope you enjoy knitting through this section. I found it really exciting to knit it the first time, you know, because I obviously swatched it and I made little kind of dishcloth size ones and things like that just to trial it. But when I actually knit it within the blanket for the first time and I saw the kind of decreases changing the shape of the blanket, and then the eyelets, and then, you know, the eyelets look like they're going in one direction but actually they're going in the other direction. It was just too much enjoyment going on for my brain. So get knitting, make yourself a cup of tea, get knitting on your blankets, and I will see you back next time for more My Favourite Blanket.
What a show! Oh my goodness, now you know. And best of all, Kay's knitted it.
I've finished that section. So I think I told you in there the estimate of how much yarn you'd have left. And I do have about 8 grams of each left. So you'll have plenty. I wanted to make sure there was a bit of leeway with each of the sections, and so far it's been round about 7 or 8 grams that you'll have left, or certainly that I had left on my gauge. So they're going to go into my mitered square, and here is, now let me get this the right way, here is the blanket. Let's orientate it now in the right direction. Here we go. It's really difficult to show you. That's pretty good, look. So yeah, that's the completed
amazing
ranunculus section, and isn't it just so pretty knit up? I just love it. And those eyelets are so lovely, and having them in there, it really does make that section go quicker. Having that 4 rows just to get through. For me, it certainly does. That's, you know, one of the main reasons I put it in there. So yes, fancy business underway.
And remember, as Kay mentioned in the episode, if you need help closing your gaps, just take a look at the second episode of My Favourite Blanket, which we've actually listed in the show notes below. Yeah. So you can go and have a close look at how to close those gaps so they look perfect.
Yes.
My Favourite Blanket is back in May. Next time, the rise and fall of the monasteries is back, and we're heading to probably the most beautiful monastery that we're going to be visiting in all the series. A very special place, totally unlike any of the others, and we can't wait to show you.
One of our favourite places.
Yes, and do remember that none of what you see here is possible without our Baker Bear patrons. So if you would like to help keep us making shows like that and this, and also get access to our tutorials, there's over 270 of them. There are lots of adventure series like Quest for the Perfect Cup of Tea, Quest for the Perfect Slice of Cake. Oh my goodness.
Yes, they were great.
I know, they were great fun. There's also our magazine, and there's a new issue coming out quite soon. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. There's loads. In fact, what you're watching here is just a fraction of the content we produce. So if you would like more Bakery Bears, please do sign up and become a Bakery Bear patron today. All the details are linked below and in the show notes below.
Thank you, everybody.
Now, it's time for the Endy Bits.
Endy Bits!
Oh my goodness, you bought some yarn.
I bought a skein of yarn.
What's your excuse?
Well, do you know, I don't have an excuse.
So you've...
Except, do we need an excuse? But no, I can't remember where I saw this yarn. I was watching something recently and the lady I was watching had got a skein of this yarn and the base just intrigued me. I'd never heard of this base before. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and look and see if they've got some of that in the shop. And she did have some, so I bought a skein because I wanted to try it, but I'm also going to do a review on it because it's a really individual base, and it was designed, I think, by the actual dyer. So I bought this from a shop called Woolly Chic in the UK, and the yarn base is called Heartspun. This is Heartspun 4-ply. And it was spun in Yorkshire in the UK, which is just brilliant. This particular colour, there was a whole range of colours that were sort of solids, but this particular colour was hand-dyed by Rivernets, and it really appealed to me because it's a really pretty tonal green. So Woolly Chic, there is the shop, and the yarn is Heartspun, and the base is 70% blue-faced Leicester and 30% Tencel. And it's a fingering weight. You get 420 metres to 100 grams, so it's perfect sock weight. It's a 2-ply. And this colourway I got that was hand-dyed by Rivernets is called Willow. And how pretty is that green? It's absolutely gorgeous. Can you see the sheen on this yarn? That's the BFL. And it just really intrigued me. And so I've looked up what Tencel is, because I'll be honest, I wasn't entirely certain. A lot of you might know, but it is actually a natural product. It's derived from wood. So it's taken from the pulp, I think, of the wood, and something's done to it. But it's a sustainable product, and it's really strong. So I'm going to try this for socks. I've got a pattern in mind for it. And I'm really going to try it. It looks like, you know, it definitely is a fingering weight. It's 2-ply. 2-ply is not my favourite for socks these days. I do prefer a 3 or a 4-ply, but I'm going to give it a go because I think it's absolutely worthy of trying. And it's such a pretty green, isn't it, that? It's absolutely gorgeous. The dye job is really pretty. So I'm going to try this for socks. Now I'm going to do a review of it, but I mean, I'll show it you here on the show as well when I get some socks on the go. But just gorgeous. So I haven't tried it yet, so I can't say what it's like to knit with, but I wanted to tell you about it because it just intrigued me. And I paid £22 for the skein, just in case you want to know the price.
Cool.
So I will let you know when I get to knit that. And
you can access all Kay's reviews on our special page off our website. You've done over 80 of them now,
wow,
which is amazing, and loads more to come through this year. And actually, our editor of Knitability, she's actually Jen. Who's she? The cat's mother.
Who's she?
Yes, Jen, the wonderful Jen, has also started doing some reviews for us too.
She
so
has.
You can also find Jen's reviews on the page that's linked in our show notes below. And they're accessible. Our reviews are accessible to our silver, gold and platinum patrons. Speaking of Jen, she's putting the finishing touches right now to the latest issue of our magazine Knitability.
Cool.
There's lots of wonderful interviews, some really great articles and so much more, and it's all coming your way on the 25th of April 2023.
Brilliant.
Our next radio show will be published on Friday the 21st of April, and you can listen to our current show, which we mentioned earlier on in today's show, the one all about grammar.
Yeah.
And just follow the link in the show notes and that'll take you straight to the place where our radio show is.
Yes.
That, as they say, is it.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for watching.
I hope you enjoy knitting your blankets, everybody.
Yes.
So excited to hear what you think about that middle section.
Yes, cool. So yes, thank you so much for watching.
Thank you, everybody.
And we'll see you next time with more.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Sitting and knitting, it's Dan and Kay, the bakery bears. Enthusiasm's not quitting for Dan and Kay, the bakery bears. They'll take you to bakery bear. You find yourself in a castle while watching the bakery bears. It never feels like a hassle to sit and watch the bakery bears. What's on your shelf or what's in your oven, or maybe a shawl you'll want to wear. So sit yourself right down and watch Dan and Kay the